you very much for the introduction. Welcome, Professor Ocer. Thank you for the invitation, and it's great to be able to open this conference. Quite an honor, and I'm very pleased and excited about that. And the topic which I've chosen to present to you is one, perhaps a critical and too specific one, but related to my research, which is about the nature of the university's role in the city, and the question of how we respond as researchers to the crisis of the university. Now, you'll all probably have heard about the crisis of the university. It's been going on for maybe 900 years, since the beginning of the university, right? It's a classic situation. But I want to analyze this crisis a little bit. The crisis, I read in preparation a few texts that come up when you talk about crisis, when you search for crisis, and I found that everyone from Husserl, philosophers, to sociologists, Thorsten Veblen, to deconstruction, post-structuralists, Derrida, you name it, there's probably not a prominent academic and scholar that we read who hasn't talked about the crisis. And of course, all the administrators and all the university lobby bodies and so on will talk about a crisis. But it's interesting that there seem to be two discourses of crisis. One, on the one hand, which says that everything is terrible, and the other hand, some people who say, no, it's fine. Yeah? And I want to somehow not come in the middle of them, but say both are wrong, if that makes sense. I only want to make 3 points, though. 3 points, really. One, that this university crisis is not addressed by the resources and tools that are being used to discuss the situation of the university. We have a lot of reports and papers and analysis and evaluation and discourse of accountability that I think is inadequate for dealing with the situation of the university, its place in our culture, in our lives, and in the global world. So the research evaluation framework in England, most of my examples, I apologize, are England, but I hope they are transferable to other places. The moves towards public-private partnership, the privatization of the university. The studies that talk about the need for impact and industry contacts and so on. These studies, I suggest, are very inadequate. They are based on strengths and weakness analysis or quality assurance visits or some kind of form-filling, multiple answer question kind of analysis. And it seems quite strange that this is so weak, so unable to confront the crises that we face. My second point is that many in the universities and at all levels, from the senior executive to the stressed and under-resourced adjunct tutors who are teaching, doing so much of the teaching, have the resources, have a lot of resources for research, but these are not being used in the accountability discourse. The accountability discourse, which heads towards an examination of the university in crisis, is not robust research. My third, and I will go into some detail as to which part of the university I think is responsible for this. I of course blame our managers, the executive, but that's just you have to target some enemy, right? And it's the men in suits that I'll target. I'm wearing a suit, so I'll take it off. But of course, I think what has happened is that while we haven't been looking, in a way, this is the crisis, while we haven't been looking, the administration, the senior administration, has managed to reformat every part of the university into what we all find somewhat, I think, incomprehensible, a set of administrative practices that are geared towards an ideal of not ideas and education and intellect, but of pecuniary gain, of finance, of business. And I want to make a critique of that. But I want to suggest the solution is that we already have the resources that can make a robust accountability of the university. That if we turn this accountability process, the accreditation process, the evaluation process, the university audits, towards the real research skills that the university have, we can make a transformation of this situation. So this is my 3 points. That we're in a crisis, that the crisis is not adequately discussed, and that we have the resources to fix that. Here, I start with some of the good news. As it's presented by the peak professional or government type bodies that tell us that the university needs to reorient itself towards business. This is the HUTNYK, the peak body for funding of universities in the United Kingdom. Graph, a nice colourful graph to start with, that tells us that things are on the improve. If you think about contract research, if you think about training for industry, if you think about involvement in regeneration programs, collaborative research with industry, and consultancy work. Each of these in the last 10 years have grown. So everything is great, basically. This is the one side where I'm borrowing a lot of cartoons from an Australian cartoonist called Michael Lunig, just to give the footnote citation. Now, the consortium of business and British industry, consortium of British industry are very much a part of this conversation about how things are great. The best of both worlds, industry and academia together, having a lovely conversation. I don't know if you can see it as clearly on this slide as it is on the brochure book, but these are two conversationalists, and we must assume they're on the one side the university, on the other side industry, and look at their speech bubbles full of entertaining ideas and so on, graphically represented. Wow, isn't the graphic good? But inside this document, they do a strength and weakness analysis, which is fairly standard. We've all probably seen these, but they tell us nothing but some platitudes. Have some statements and quotations from various figures. Recognize that some things are difficult. I don't need you to read this. Just assume that you've seen many of these. They pass around the administrative sector in multiple copies, often copied from each other. This is one of the things about administrative form filling is there's no question of plagiarism there. And they start to talk within the document about a kind of battle. The conversation is going on, but the battle becomes a war. Did you see the headline here? Collaboration can also help win the war for talent. I think we need to become suspicious when people start talking about a war. Right? It's good that people talk. On the other hand, talking can sometimes lead to war. Right? It also can end the war. We should sit and have peace talks and so on. That's recognized. But inside the education document, inside the accountability discourse, this war metaphor is really strong. By the time we get to the end of the document, the chief of GlaxoSmithKline, one of the largest companies in the UK involved in education, is also talking about a war, supply lines and so on. But one subtle difference has changed. In this conversation between business and the universities, you see the university no longer has a voice. We've shrunk into the corner. I think this is symptomatic of the discourse. We've not participated, the universities have not participated as academics, as scholars, as researchers, in this conversation that is going on between the administrators and the CEOs and the revolving door that exists there. What I'm suggesting is that a malignant and parasitic bureaucratic class has taken over the university without us watching. without us seeing. We know what they look like, as I said, and I'm going to make bad jokes about them. Here's a bunch of good old boys announcing a new initiative, the development of an international and overseas campus for one of the UK universities. I won't mention them by name, but it's pretty curious what they think they're doing here. They've set up a franchise, and these kind of franchises are part of, systematically, we're having them all over the place. Lots of universities in the UK want to set up international branches. I don't know, Nottingham in Malaysia, or Monash in Malaysia, or so on. Here, this case is in Singapore, and they kind of think they won the Grand Prix. Except it's not quite the Grand Prix. It's not quite as celebratory as you like. They haven't got alcohol here. These were bottles of alcohol that look like alcohol, but when you explode them, only confetti comes out. So it wasn't even a real celebration. It was a fake celebration. But nonetheless, it's indicative of one dimension of the things are good. We're expanding the university into other countries, and no question, no critique of this. It's just really good that we have these franchises, according to these guys. They are, of course, the people who are reading all the documents, the accountability, the research evaluation framework, and all the quality assurance reports that are being prepared. But those reports, I want to suggest, are really graphically weak. For example, when you look at some of the image making that goes on in the university, more time is spent making the graphic than making the content of the report. Here's a classic. Student survey results are seen as a race to see who can get a very simple statistic has maybe 3 hours, well, maybe it wasn't 3 hours, but some considerable time is spent making this quite cheesy graphic. The details don't matter. I think the person who is winning really is the person who has the lowest report. It's my discipline, anthropology. But this, and it's psychology that's doing well. I mean, this is a stereotype, right? That they like form filling and surveys, but nonetheless, what I'm suggesting is the report is weak. The data that you're being presented with is weak, but the graphic is quite good. But this is a part of an emergent, or in fact a dominant ideology that presents evaluation in a narrow and shallow format, with, of course, a lot of razzmatazz and promotion. For example, in the private-public partnerships, when real research is involved, and for example, if you remember in 2011, maybe you saw the news that there was riots in August of 2011 in the UK. There was a massive research project run by the London School of Economics in partnership with the private organisation, which was The Guardian, and they won awards for this research. But even where the research has content, and they made, I'm critical of the way in which they did that research, but they made some substantive, some important points in the research. Even when the research is significant, the way of presenting it becomes more like a competition, more like a publicity event. If you see here, the research was between the LSE and The Guardian, but when the LSE was promoted, won an award from another newspaper, the importance of The Guardian completely dropped out. Very unusual that The Guardian's logo didn't get on this statement when they were a part of the research. This suggests to me that the main priority, and we've probably all experienced this, is that promotion and advertising comes to take over the space where ideas should have been making the running. In fact, isn't it the case that nearly all of us are asked by the publicity office or the research office to now reformat our research so that it can be presented in a press release? You need some snappy, nice sentences to talk about your research so you can get publicity, which isn't publicity for your ideas. It's publicity for your university in the competition with other universities, so that we can get more students, so we can get more money, so we can win the competition with other universities, so we can... There's a spiral of competition just for pecuniary gain. The ideas, the education is dropping out of the picture. The research evaluation framework is completely about that. It's about league tables, who's at the top of the league table, and then who gets more funding, more research, attracts more students, more PhD students, and so on. It's a star system, but the stars are even dropping out of that system. You keep your stars, your academic stars, only to the extent that they help your publicity. If their ideas are too difficult, don't translate into the press release, or they have some kind of critique of managerialism or a block to the new managerialism, they're encouraged to leave quietly. The research evaluation framework itself is a rush to the middle ground. It's a competition to move to the safe, disciplinary middle ground. It doesn't reward the difficult, the unusual, the questioning. Now, it turns out, I think, while we haven't been watching, that every single part of the university has been reformatted by this administrative coup, I think, a political coup. So if you think of the different parts of the university, there's not one now that doesn't have its daily work turned to the promotion, the competition, and the money issue. The accommodation office now is very concerned about showing to the students who are going to come, our recruits, that the environment that they will move into is safe, pleasant, the latest facilities, not too expensive, although it's quite expensive, and all clean and like a gated community. The career service, of course, it's obvious that they've got an interest in finance. I could go through the communications, that's the publicity wing. They're in competition with other universities. Conference services, of course, is providing industry with the facilities of the university at a premium, but it's a kind of backdoor privatization in some ways. The development office, the alumni. Alumni is very important. You have to recruit your former students to get them to donate. And you can have events all over the world where you send your captain of erudition, this is Thorsten Veblen's phrase, the vice-chancellor, captain of erudition, to go and talk to them, to tell them some slightly off-colour anecdotes and an after-dinner speech, and hopefully get them to donate. That's basically our vice-chancellor's function, isn't it? Just to be a kind of after-dinner speaker and there to cut the tape when you rename a building after somebody who's dead and probably wouldn't agree with their name being used on the building for advertising reasons. As I say, every section of the university, the imagery on the websites gives this away, I think. The estates service, health and safety, the Teaching and Learning Centre, all these things are presented in a promotional way. And with straplines, with slogans. And these slogans are also superficial. I mean, we care about academic reputation only to the extent that it's part of the competition. Our academic reputation is not because this is the place for great ideas, although it may be that your university is the place for great ideas. But the reason we promote the great ideas is that will attract more students, will attract more funding. The research evaluation framework is something similar. We will promote that, the research evaluation framework will promote that research which already gets funding and will attract more funding. Those that get funding already are likely to be the ones to get more funding. A race to the middle. I think this logical orientation is all the way through. The student services sector, the student support part is something like that. The ethics committee, the research ethics committee. What's the research ethics committee? Isn't that just the body that makes sure the university doesn't get sued? It's not really about the ideas and ethics, it's about protecting against lawsuits. Isn't the research office about finding which research will be most likely to get funding? In fact, the evaluation in universities I've spent time in the UK, the evaluation was more about the budget than about the ideas. Did you get the budget sums right? That was most important. It's the business research partnership, and it's the consultancy, the business office, the HR department, the visa office. All these places can be thought of as having been reformatted in the orientation towards money. The availability of the network, of the computer network. It's presented to students as something that's, you know, come to this university, we have the latest, we have the best, we have an ever-growing, ever-expanding, ever better, more orientation. Okay. I've gone through all this, and it's possibly, you may just think that I'm alienated and depressed, right, about the situation in the universities. The crisis, that's the crisis. But the crisis there is either it's terrible or it's fine. Everything is great. Dialogue that comes from the side of government and industry, which is a boosterism trying to promote the impact agenda and so on. On the other hand, very stressed academics with less and less time to do their own research because they're having to fill in forms that honestly we think are mostly useless, and doing tasks and writing out, I don't know, course approval documents or going to the course approval committee that has no representation from students on it. Maybe take some notice of the student survey, but that was a horse race. And we see people leaving the university sector in droves. But there's a massive resource there. And I want to suggest that instead of these pointless jobs in administration, doing these useless surveys that are inadequate, simplistic, and in fact cretinizing, that we can develop real adequate research. We have researchers in universities, news to some people, but we have researchers in universities who have research skills that can be turned to accountability in a deep, researched way. And this is my third point. I want to suggest that this is where we should be going. We should be taking and ripping up those evaluation league tables and forms and deploying resources that will be saved from not doing all the consultancies and all the evaluations and the quality audits. I mean, a review of review processes, true story. Right? 6, 7 professors sitting in a room for 3 days to review the review processes, each with a pile of documents that none of them read because they were just these form figures. We save money. That's 3 days' work of a professor. I don't know. You can do the sums of 7 professors. You see there's a whole lot of money available that could be turned to making a part of every person in the university's job research into the university. A part of it, a component. And while we're showing the door to the senior executives, some of that money can be redeployed to make every person in the university in every sector every section of the university a researcher. I don't just mean the privileged academics and the students as researchers, but the estates department people, the finance department people. With training, I mean, there's going to be money claimed back from the useless administration, which can be used for training, to give them and to use the resources that we already have to do deep research into the accountability of the university. What if the university was subject to the work of anthropologists, doing visual anthropologists, for example? They're very, very, very keen to use their resources and their skills, and they're looking for places to deploy that. We want deep ethnographies of the different sections of the university, of the department, so we understand what's going on there. And we understand in a robust and sophisticated and nuanced way where the ideas are, what ideas are funded, how the difference between mainstream and eccentricity or critique work. Bring in those anthropologists that have got the resources. Or the counter mappers. Let me show you a project from the geographers. The geographers who are really good at looking at the relationship between the university and the city, or the university and immigration or visa issues and so on. This is a counter mapping project of a university in the UK. This is supposed to be the UK and all the countries that send students there. And it analysed in a deep and sophisticated way how the university has been turned into a visa offshore selling of education, a scheme for selling education, and the difficulties are placed on international students to get their visas. And the visas system is in fact even a pecuniary thing where it's all about making more and more money through fees and charges and excluding those colleges that are a little bit outside of the accreditation system. While it's all well and good to have some private universities, according to the current government, there are others that are rogue, allegedly rogue universities. They did, this group, this is the Queen Mary counter mapping group, they did actually do some of the graphic stuff as well. I've got to acknowledge that. There is a place for communicating through graphics, but what they did on the back of there, see, this was a big map of the university, about this big, like one of the poster displays outside, I suppose, in size. On the back of it, they produced this game that you would play and go through the process and learn by doing all of the difficulties that international students have in getting visas. And they took that as a kind of research tool to groups. They workshopped it, and it's been played by, I think they made 30,000 of these games. It's been played all over the world now. It's a way of exposing the problems of the university and encouraging people to use this kind of counter-mapping research to examine their own situation in the university in a new way that really goes quite deep. It drills down. It's not like a consortium of British industry graph with some thought bubbles that say very little. Yes, the digital economy people, they have massive resources that they can deploy, rather than just talking about the importance of the network, the deep data, metadata, data mining, and so on. There are sophisticated tools of analysis in the university that could be turned to accountability. There's the regeneration projects that the university is always a part of, and the geographers, again, have something to say about that. I'd suggest also there's a tradition, and maybe some of you have identified where I'm coming from. I'm partly coming from the visual anthropology, and there's a critical tradition in visual anthropology that I'm going, but also a Marxist tradition of workplace inquiry, investigations into your own workplace. This was Marx's, one of Marx's genius ideas, I think, was to ask the workers themselves to do the investigation. 3 years before he died, he set up a questionnaire, 100 questions, 100 critical questions, which he sent to over 1,000 factory workers. This tradition goes on. The Bolsheviks used to do factory exposures in Pravda. It became a part of the Frankfurt School, early Frankfurt School orientation, the what was called the parallel sociology. It was socialism and Barbary, the Castoriadis and those people deployed that tool, workplace inquiry, and it was really big for the Italian autonomists when they took over the Fiat factories and so on. The initiative and the labour of the workplace, in our case the university, in their case the Fiat factories, was done by the workers. The workers were the best ones to understand what was going on. What they needed was the time from work, a portion of their time, to do that. Now my suggestion is that we reclaim some of the massive expenditure given to the senior bureaucrats who do nothing but publicity anyway, and stop this competition amongst ourselves, which is unseemly, and turn our focus onto how the university works and make it really accountable. Deep research, deep understanding of the practices of the university done by the people in the university itself. This also has the benefit of taking the people who work in estates or in catering or security and turning them into researchers as well, which I think is important. I'm committed to a kind of university that is part of the community that sees everyone as valuable, so everyone is a researcher. It's a disaster if we leave research only to the senior researchers. My Larson cartoon is a suggestion, fire is invented. Because what are they doing with the research? They're turning it to industry. They're turning it into this industry-university partnership that is not a partnership, because it leads to closed research, research that can't be shared, research that is about knowledge that's proprietary, it's about innovation for corporations. They develop all these research and development parks. This is my only published cartoon. I had to get it in. It was published in the press. The difference between a research technology park, I mean, the contradiction is a technology park. Park is a different... The ideology behind this is that we will reformat the university so that industry can move into the campus. Right? And that's fantastic for industry. New facilities, parking, library, captive researchers, available researchers, and a space where the scientists, instead of sitting in their labs, eccentrically experimenting, can come down to the park part and engage with each other in a nice, encourage each other in a conversation, and then go back to the lab, reinvigorated and invent. Except the things that they're inventing are directed primarily to the funders, to industry. Let's take away some of that, and I suggest reconfigure this circumstance by making everyone a researcher, by allocating funding to promote this research, and really drilling deep into the possibilities that are already there in the university to deploy our research. I've only mentioned a few: visual anthropology, geography, the digital. I don't like the phrase digital humanities. I mean, no, it's not that I don't like it, I just don't really understand it. How's it different to other humanities? And I thought, you know, cave painting was digital. Remember back then? They put paint, back then, thousands of years ago, they put paint in their mouth and blew on their digits to make a picture. Right? Isn't that digital? Anyway, that's a whole different story. My argument is three parts. One, we have a crisis in the university that is not being addressed by this propaganda, boosterism talk on the one hand, or the stress. There were all the individual cases of all of us feeling stressed, Thomas Doherty or other people persecuted by the university, the individual breakdowns and so on. Neither of those address the crisis. We have a series of documents that purport to be an analysis, evaluation, accountability, the HUTNYK visit. Right, so in the UK, what you get is the peak body, the peak research, or the body overseeing education comes and visits your campus. It sounds like a nice thing, you know, get out the cups of tea from the catering service, which is completely commercialized, and give them a cup of tea and have a chat with them. But instead, actually, it's months of work preparing all these documents that the HUTNYK visitors hardly even look at. We have this massive apparatus of soft impact or surface level evaluation, and it doesn't address the crisis. But we have massive resources in the universities to do real research, to do substantive research, and if we funded them with money we saved from removing some of the excessive waste, we would have a very different picture of what the university could be, what the university is, what ideas and what education. Yeah, you get where I'm going? I think that's the part where we need a root and branch transformation. And we need to fight for that. It is a war. It's a war for ideas. And it's a war against the malignant and parasitic bureaucratic class that's taken over the university. And it's old, not that I'm suggesting we go back to the old ways, but it's old principles of education and ideas. Okay? I'm going to leave some time for questions because I've got some other bits that I've skipped over and left out. And I suspect that some of what I'm saying, maybe people have got their own experiences of stress or success, or their own exposure to some of these graphic documents and so on, or anecdotes to tell, or questions to ask of me, or critique to make. So thank you very much. That's me. So are there any questions? I'll give you a couple of seconds to. Hello. I'll chair as well. Hi. Can you speak louder, I think? Yeah. Maybe stand up, yeah, if you don't mind. There's a microphone, in fact. Sorry, you can. Not working? I feel like Oprah now.
Okay, thank you so much. it's a part of my experience. It's a comment on your, let's say, discussion. It's not a question. You know, that when I visited United States and I was there in Oxford University, I noticed something so important in that university. You know that they try to put an open day for each college in that university to make, let us say, to make something so clear for all people there, maybe from around the Oxford city or maybe outside from Oxford. So they try to make people, you know, learn many things about their university, okay, and their experiences there, and even, let us say, the economic parts, or maybe, let us say, the educational parts there. So it is so important, you know, that to make your universities a part of your world or a part of your city. And it's just a comment on your discussion, it's not a question. For this reason, I think that it's another question for you, that why don't we make that university, you know, what is the next step after university? I mean that when you are working for, let's say, for making people, you know, our students so successful, but what's the next step after university?
Is it a question for me?
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
question.
I do
after
think,
I finish my comment,
I do think it's an interesting question.
Yes.
But
So
do you know what I think?
you're preparing, since you are a professor in university, so you are preparing your students to make, let's say, to make them so successful in their society. So what's the next step after this university?
I do have a comment on that, but I welcome anyone else saying. My comment is that university doesn't stop. That actually the idea that the university is a separate place from the community, and all of the workers in the university should be the community, is a conversation that can never stop. Bernard Stiegler, who's a French theorist who's writing very interesting material, his book Taking Care of the Youth and the Generations, and his latest book is called State of Shock, talks about this. There can be in the intellectual conversation that the universities have a responsibility to foster. We don't have a responsibility to work for industry, we have a responsibility to foster the conversation of education, of ideas, of intellect, right? Which is housed in the disciplines. The disciplines should be interdisciplinary, they should expand, but there can be no end to that conversation. So there is no after the university. What there needs to be is put the university into society, open the university, right?
Okay.
Not block the university, not make it for fees. No? I mean, one of the innovations that happened in some of the universities in the UK is the academics now are opening their lectures free to the public. Great. So my course, for example, used to have 27 students in it, and I opened it up to the public, 140 people came. And we're doing something very, very deep, 100 pages of Marx, Das Kapital, every week. It's an intense reading, and 140 people came, just because it was free and public. Yeah. These people, some of them, the oldest I think was only 77, right? And he'd sit in the front row and argue with me the whole day. It's a 3-hour course, right? Dedicated people. People want to be in the university if it's about ideas, not if it's about a horse race. Okay. I mean, who wants to come for that? In fact, I want to leave. So I think there should be no after the university.
Yes, thank you so much.
It really is Oprah. It's fantastic. Hi. Maybe you have to. Is that one working?
Thank you. Jaromir Drozdowicz, Adam Mickiewicz, University of Poland. I really liked your idea of bringing anthropology into universities. Well, considering the fact that I am an anthropologist myself, so could you elaborate more on that ethnography of universities, the idea of understanding of those institutions?
Yeah, sure. So this is my image for that. Where is it? I mean, yes, my name's John and I am an anthropologist. I read my last ethnography just 2 weeks ago, and I'm trying to give them up one day at a time. But I feel like that's confessional from Alcoholics Anonymous or something. But I made my career in a critique of anthropology, but I think that's what anthropology is. I mean, like any discipline that you come from, you have a short characterization of it. But I taught visual anthropology for 12 years, and I saw massive enthusiasm on the parts of those students to really get in, and not just in some verite, fly-on-the-wall cinema sort of way, to engage with the ideas and tell a story about what goes on in the everyday of the university. That, for me, is where the accountability discussion could go. Rather than some surface-level statistics or some promotional activity, to really look at what people are doing, to be accountable in a real way. So the anthropology students that I know who are graduated from a master's program in visual anthropology, they are desperately looking for work as well. I mean, it's not a massively remunerated idea unless you move into the university and teach more anthropologists, right? So in terms of the strengths and weakness analysis that the administration does, there's no immediate financing stream for this. But if we took the money that was spent on all of those strengths and weaknesses and deployed it to the different disciplines to do some reflection on their workplace, we would get some very interesting results. Not just anthropology though. I mean, I think of course every discipline should be examining the university. Every section of the university should be empowered or have access to these kind of training skills and resources. I mean, nowadays the media is such, and the programs for making films are such that you can access them. It's not like in the 60s when the first experiment of opening the university and opening and to a kind of radical perspective stalled, and I think it stalled because the media was unidirectional. Now the media is two-way. We can talk back to the dominant story. I don't think we've been doing that in the university. The dominant story has been business and university together. There's this propaganda from all of these graphics, but there's a critical perspective that can come. Anthropologists are very good at critiquing themselves as well, so let's take it seriously. And let's give them some space to do that. It's the same for every other discipline. I mean, I think the media especially should be looking at how the university promotes itself and doing a critique, not just some kind of audience evaluation survey.
I'm from Saudi Arabia, Prince Sultan University, Riyadh. I have two questions for you. Number one, I just put out the slogan over there, donate now, right? So is this working both for the public universities and for the private universities at the same time? Second question is that, do you think that our success of the university is reflected by the alumni's employment rate? Is our KPI, can we just associate our KPI of the success of the university to the employment rate of the alumni?
I'm, as I said, anthropology, so not enough of an economic expert to answer your question, although I do know we are facing a very interesting scenario in relation to both KPI and GDP and so on. Universities in the UK, I think, is something like 2.3% of GDP, at least officially. You know, the way in which the UK is evaluating GDP now is about to include nighttime economy and illicit economy and drugs and sex and so on. And so I suspect because of the nature of universities that the contribution to GDP will increase because that's where drugs and sex go on, right? Not just, but under 3% is not a huge part of the economy. But the introduction of the loans and fees scheme in the UK, having students now with 9,000 per year for their undergraduate degrees, 6,000 for MAs, and so 3 years of 9,000 fees and loans for their accommodation and their living expenses mean that it's suggested by Andrew McGettigan, who does know about these numbers, that in 20 years' time, 2040, see, I can't even do maths, 26 years' time, 26 years' time, it looks like the unsecured, the unpaid deficit of the loan scheme will be 191 billion pounds. Right? 191 billion is a significant part of anyone's GDP or whatever. So what we're facing here is the possibility of a subprime crash, right? The loans, and basically these loan schemes, the loan book, all the people that are being indebted, is about to be sold on by this government to collectors. I mean, they're taking the same kind of risks that the housing market took in the US that led to the 2007 crash. So the economics of it, some people in the economics departments really have to spend a significant part of their research getting into this. Some are. Megadigan is a very good example. As to the donate now, I don't know which direction that is in. It's back here, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. Donate now. Ah, wrong one. Sorry. I mean, just click and donate, right? That's what this says to you. It doesn't have to say anything sophisticated. It is true that donors, perhaps, you know, those wannabe philanthropists that have some money to give to a major university like Oxford or Cambridge or LSE or UCL, none of the universities I've worked at, where there is money coming in, habitually do not distinguish between advertising and ideas, right? They respond to the Vice-Chancellor's happy stories that he tells in the after-dinner discussion with the alumni event that's in Brazil or somewhere, right? It's about promoting the feeling of the university, the propaganda of the university. Come, remember the time you had when you were young, now you're rich, open your wallet, right? And I kind of think that that's cheating. I don't know, I feel very uncomfortable with that. There are, of course, some philanthropists who are, you know, have got money and feel guilty of it and do want to get into ideas and promote research and teaching. And you know, philanthropy has a basis in gift work. Yeah, okay. But if the gift economy was sufficient, you know, we would have fixed things by now. I think it's largely, the donations are largely about guilt avoidance and therefore the donor. Right? Yes, by all means, take the money, name a building after them. You know, I have no real problem with that part because we need that kind of funding. Because the government is clawing it back. The government is the Gadgrind, yeah. So those are two parts. But we're in a serious situation. If we think that our way out is to get more donations, then the subprime crisis and the real serious economic problems that we're facing are not being addressed. And there's the problem. We're looking in this direction when we should be looking at what we're doing, and we're not.
Thank you.
Conversation with each other as well. There's a gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Jack Wendell. I'm teaching at a university in Japan, Tokyo University. I've never taught an North American university. But I did come a little bit late to your talk. I'm wondering what you think about the business of sports promotion in North American universities. I don't know if you mentioned that in the first part of your talk.
I didn't, but I want to.
Yes, but I think it needs addressing because you mentioned the word unseemly, and for example, the salaries of many basketball and football coaches exceed by great numbers the salaries of, for example, university presidents.
Yeah. The football coach, of course, is an advertisement for the university. Notre Dame, oh, yeah. Thorsten Veblen wrote in a book in 1918 where he excoriated, he really critiqued heavily this phenomenon in the US. 100 years ago, nearly. 100 years ago, this critique was being made, that the sports facilities were better than the teaching facilities. Yeah. That's enough of a critique, right? I think that's it there. Okay, but now the sports facilities are part of the advertising, just like the accommodation, just like the landscaped front of the university, right? Inside the teaching facilities, I mean, this is a nice room, but some of the rooms are not yet nice. The thing we've renovated first in the universities as part of the gentrification process has been, yes, the cosmetic side of the university. The facilities, the sports, the gym, the foyer, the front landscaped arrival area, the lovely long desk at the first reception, the Vice-Chancellor's office. Of course, that's always one of the first to be renovated in usually the best building on the campus, the oldest building in the campus. So these are part of a cosmetics. Sure, it's unseemly that they get huge amounts of money, but the huge amounts of money are also given to others in the university, I think, that are peripheral to our core, what should be our core practice. See, I don't think the executive really justify what they're doing. I mean, they don't even think that. I mean, they're in the business of promoting financial stability in order to promote more financial stability, right? With a small margin of a development fund to keep on renovating the foyers and their offices and the approach to the university. I mean, I agree we need good buildings, and maybe winning some sports events brings in some sponsorship, but then that's again a part of the competition. Veblen was very interesting. 1918, he is asking the question, does competition amongst universities serve the development of ideas? At some level, yes, conflict and debate, competitive debate is important for the frisson of ideas, right? But that's not happening in the sports field. It's not a critical engagement, is it, when you're 6-0 up or whatever, because you've got Leroy, whatever, Jones on your team that you've brought in. But there's a space for debate and criticism and competition. But when the competition then is grafted into an industrial context, and businesses, universities, are competing against each other, and therefore not collaborating, right? Because that's what happens when it becomes industry, when it becomes a competition for money, is you don't have the kind of collaboration, then I think we have a problem. So that sporting metaphor can extend. Also, all this talk of war or winning. The sports metaphor in the administrative circuit is deeply disturbing. Come on, team, play together. You know, and when administrators start to tell you something like that, you know that you're soon for the chop. Right? You'll be relegated to the bench. And I'm saying we should kick them out of the game. Yeah, that's taking the metaphor too far, but thank you for your question. I highly recommend this Thorsten Veblen book, right? 1918, although he wrote it in 1909, so before World War I, 100 years ago. But it's fantastic. It's called The Higher Learning in America, and it's so relevant for today. But then I also think that Bernard Stiegler's work is spot on as well. Taking care of the youth and the generations. This is a fantastic book. Okay, I think we have to stop and have a tea break. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the invitation again. And please take away the idea.